All right. So let's start up this plenary. We're going to do check-ins. So if everyone wants to go around, say name, pronouns, and something senatorial you did this week. Is that a word? That's an adjective. What? Say your name, pronouns, and something senatorial you did this week.
We're talking about celebrating the holiday.
Okay, yeah. How you celebrated the holiday today?
Which one?
Easter?
There's like 3.
Yeah, not everybody celebrated
pick.
Easter today.
Oh, okay.
There's plenty of
I
holidays.
counted 3 at some point today.
Not
It's
everybody
National Tea
celebrated the holiday.
Every day is a
No,
holiday.
Tuesday's tomorrow.
That's not a good way to put
Is that for like veterans or what is that?
It's New England
We'll skip
celebration
it
of
then.
like
Okay.
people who-
Let's do something you did that was like scientifically
Okay, great.
So I'm Peter. I go by he, him, his. And I did a bunch of EMT tech research this week. EMT tech research this week. And talked to Eric about bringing a course in to Oberlin to college.
Wait, are we saying how we celebrated or senatorial?
This is how Peter celebrates.
Either one.
Oh.
We're good either way.
My name is Miliaku. I'm a second year, and she, her, hers. And I went to church and praised the Lord, like I do.
I'm Lauren. I prefer she, her, and hers, and I did lots and lots and lots of poetry.
Yeah, we did.
I'm Emma. I use she, her, and hers. I'm a first year. For Senate, I spent literal hours fixing the website this week. And for the holiday, I went to church and I went for lunch with my family for Easter. So that was fun. I'm done. I'm not talking.
You can keep
No,
talking.
I'm done.
I don't mind. I don't really have much. I'm Aaron, prefer he, him, and his. Second year. I'm looking at my time card because I just can't remember what I did this week. But I did a lot of stuff. A lot of Senate work. Probably most Senate work I've ever done. Like this pay for you. And I didn't do much today. Like, yeah, I didn't celebrate much.
I'm Andrew, he, him, and his, and the senatorial thing I did this week was attend a plenary. It's happening right now.
What's your name?
Andrew.
Are you singing?
No.
Give us some loathing.
I'm Kiana. I use she, her, and hers, his, and theirs. I had my office hours, went to MRC training, did all that stuff. We all did. Today, I didn't get to celebrate holidays because I had a bond retreat from 10 to 5, but it was fun and nice to see everybody for 7 hours.
I'm Rachel. I use she, her, and hers. During my office hours, I met with Julia from SFC, and we talked about extending the SFC deadline.
Passover. I did today.
What?
Passover.
Oh, today's Passover or didn't I today?
Someone told me that. I don't know. I'm a terrible Jew.
I'm done. I'm Sarah, second year, not a senator, and I celebrated Easter with my friend because she's never not celebrated Easter before, and I learned what Easter was because I'm Jewish.
I'm Jesse, he, him, his. This week, MRC training, also the tobacco reform. And then, Chinese review this weekend, so I spent some time with my mommy and daddy, which was always nice.
I'm lucky that I used him and his. I was doing the same things that we all did, and I had a community so I like the financial policy change. And today I worship my work. Which is not really
Kiki, given theirs, given his. I'm also sick, so that's not weird. Doing with me celebrated today. Same stuff. I went to a meeting for talking about the construction of high school. I guess this kind of same stuff. It was connected to the union labor and trying to get union labor for the hotel building this week.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm used to shooting nurse, but whatever you're comfortable with is fine. Sorry, what is the plug back here? I'm on set. I'm usually at Oscar board at this time, so this is an interesting change of pace.
I'm Ari. I don't have PGPs, but I'm used to sharing hers. I've been like working on like trying to put together something, because I know like during this whole like financial aid policy change, people are also like, well, like it's one thing to like repeal something that they already did, but like there's a lot of holes that probably in financial aid policy as it is, and like so I've just been talking to some senators, talking to some people at other campuses, seeing like how they approach the issue of financial accessibility, and like have written out a lot of ideas, and that was good. And then in terms of the holiday, my dad texted me, and that was really nice. He said Happy Easter. I would miss you.
Okay, cool. So moving on to outside business.
Wait, who's missing?
We don't have Paul, Mia, Harrison, and Leah.
Harrison's the only one missing. Leah, Paul, and Luke definitely can't make it. Leah's going to try, but she probably can't make it. But Harrison should be here.
Harrison didn't say that.
Harrison didn't tell me he wasn't going to be here. He should be here. He'll probably show up.
Good, so we can all right, outside business. So, no. We can't vote, but no one's close to one.
Well, I just said we have 10.
Damn it. All right, fair enough.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah,
There's not. We're good.
Sweet. Approval of agenda. Do we have anything anyone wants to add there? If we're good. Did I get a general feelings on the agenda? We're chilling? Okay, awesome. Outside business. Any outside business? Moving on to announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Not good. Lauren.
Yeah, so I spoke with the student union in terms of our office, and basically they have a strategy for the next few years where they want to vacate offices that aren't being used frequently, such as ours. Basically because as the student union, they want to have more spaces where people can like, go in and study and reserve that room if they want to have a quick visit or something like that. And given that I'm under the impression, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, most people don't use that office. I go in there to study sometimes, but I don't think we have like a function for it as an organization. I know there are a lot of files in there which are pretty old, and so one thing that the union suggested is that if they took our room away from us as an organization and used it as like this place where people like study and have meetings, we could transfer the files to archives in the library, and so they could like organize it and stuff, and so if anyone ever had specific information that they wanted to look for, like throughout sentence history, it would be much more easily accessible than like having to dig through those files and try to find them themselves. So that's just a conversation I wanted to make you all aware of. They also explained to me that whether or not it actually happens is kind of independent of our consent. So if they want to do it, they're going to do it, which I think is kind of weird. But so yeah, we can also like if we agree to this, I can just let them know and they'll like, go ahead and start contacting archives and stuff. So if you guys have general thoughts on that.
So Lauren's next up on stack.
Well, I have a separate announcement, so I can wait until this issues.
So Emma, you want to go and Jesse?
Yeah, as the office manager, or operations manager, the person who manages the office, I'm pretty sure if I'm not going there, nobody is going there, because also, like, last time I went through, like, things from a few years ago just left on the desk. So I don't see why we actually need to have this office other than storage space, even though it's, like, not that big, so I don't know if we even have meetings in there, but that's irrelevant. So I don't know, I think if the Institutional Memory Task Force ever actually meets, which in theory we're going to meet, that'd be good. So that would be like a really good thing for that group of people to handle, because we can manage like processing these records, preserve institutional memory, and just dealing with all of that. So I would support that move.
Yeah, I support it.
Awesome. Lauren?
Yeah, so I hope everyone got my email that had like Rio in the subject line. And I just want to encourage you guys all again to reach out to listservs that you're a part of, groups that you're a part of. If you know like freshmen and sophomores who are like really involved on campus and passionate about student life, you should really encourage them to apply. Like I said, we've only gotten 3 applications, and it's really important that we have like a really diverse, full group of applicants to consider so we get the best committee possible.
Are there still only 3 applicants?
Yeah, I think so. But I know at least 2 SOC members are still going to reapply, so there will be 5. But given that there are 5 seats open, that's like not, it's not good.
Joe, any other announcements?
Can I get a general feelings on identifying the student meeting that we're good with like not having office anymore?
General feelings on that?
Quick question. Scrapbook, how was that? I mean, that's not, yeah, go.
Does this actually exist?
Nobody can find it.
Like the physical, because the last thing I heard was that AD Hogan had it.
Yeah. That was the last time that I heard it talked about, was when they
No
were
one
on
has seen
it.
it since.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Put myself on stack. I seem to remember asking AD for it back in the day and being told that it was somewhere. So it does exist, but it also hasn't been updated in a very long time. And then I was told it was online also. So we can look for it online. Probably in the Senate account somewhere. So that might be a good place to look. And then you're on stack next.
Okay, well, in the bylaws, it says it has to be like a hard copy, so if it's online, that doesn't really count, doesn't it? I think it does. If it, I feel like it says that. I don't know, I told people it said that. I can double check on that. But I mean, I think at this point the scrapbook is just completely outdated and obsolete. I think we need to have points of institutional memory, but I don't see why we need a scrapbook, especially when we haven't seen it in years, and even if we had, like, it's not accessible to the public because it would sit in the student senate office. So I'm not like proposing anything at this time, but I just want to put it on the table. It's probably not the best way for us to preserve institutional memory, and I'm in favor of us reforming that system in our last 2 to 3 weeks in office.
Word. I put myself on stack. I got you up next. The scrapbook exists so senators can read it when they start Senate, and that's their form of institutional memory. Given your training is cursory and like an hour long, it's supposed to be something. So, I mean, if we can update it, which, I mean, wow, yeah, it's going a couple years behind, I think, it would still be useful. The general public can access it, but it's more for senators trying to brush up. Okay.
Yeah, I also think that if we do this archiving thing, then maybe we'll find it. If it is like physically something. So, can we just finish that? I don't know if I saw that. The general
Feelings, yeah. On getting rid of our office.
Spirit and good. Okay.
Oh, we also have file cabinets in there that we should break into. They're locked. Okay, moving on. Office hour reports. Did anyone have office hour reports this week? Any cool, interesting things? Okay. Anything students brought to your attention that you think is worth mentioning here? Just in general? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I talked to some students about the forum, and they had some feedback on it. So there's a couple of students who did go, but they said that one, they would not have gone if I hadn't twisted their arm into it. Like, if they didn't know a senator, they would have had 0 interest in going. The second thing they said was because it was called the Student Senate Forum. Originally, they were unclear whether or not it was for all students, because like it could have sounded like it was a Student Senate Forum, and like they didn't know if that was open to the public or not, but it was. The third, they would really like pizza at the next one, and the fourth was they felt a little like I don't know. They felt good about like OCDC, I think. They thought it was a good format. So those are thoughts that I got from students.
But after discussion of the tobacco policy forum, so we can just talk about what was talked about or.
Any general feelings on that? Awesome. What we added?
Any other officer reports from anyone?
Did you say, could we talk about what happened before?
Forum, yeah, under discussions? Awesome. Probably misspelled that. Okay, moving on. Go.
This is an offside, like someone mentioned in passing. So in regards to forums, people like the three they have, but also financially one would be good. Particularly if we can do it like this last one, but instead of like this back in 20 hours, if we could have like members of the administration explain why the financial aid policy changed, like what it actually does. Because as far as I know, the only like text that's available is that one block of that one paragraph that says things will be adjusted accordingly. That doesn't explain anything. So I mean, I guess we need to talk to me about this, and she's not here. But do you guys feel like that would be like a good thing to do? We could squeeze that in, perhaps next, maybe like the first week of May. Is that next week? Maybe like the week right before, like the week of the 5th. I don't think we have anything scheduled for that.
A lot of forums.
I did think of this one would be particularly heavily attended.
Alright,
So some of the students on the student health working group have been emailing with Eric, so I can't be here. But there's like a tentative lunch scheduled for students who'd like to talk with him about like your interest in student health being moved closer to campus, possibly including the counseling center or not. So I just wanted everyone to know if you're interested in going. It's going to be Thursday, May 1st at noon, and I'm not exactly sure where. But Zia and I, and probably other senators who've been working on that group, will be going.
cool. Thank you. And that's, you said, Thursday the 1st at noon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Any other officer reports or thoughts on a financial aid forum? Okay, awesome. Moving on to committee reports. Any committee reports? Anything? Go for it.
I went to the community-based learning committee meeting. It was me, Beth Listman, Mary Kay Gray of the conservatory, and Eve Sandberg of the politics department. And it was a nice meeting. We talked about their strategic plan and how that's going to change and how they're trying to like get some more service-based learning stuff added to the Oberlin strategic plan, because that would be really important. And they're talking about doing some outreach, like Bonner Center outreach to the conservatory.
Cool. All right. Yeah.
This didn't happen yet, but the Admissions and Financial Aid Committee like planned an extra like kind of emergency meeting about financial aid stuff. It's happening in the next week or two, so we'll have some to report back.
Awesome. Anything else? Any other committee reports? Okay, awesome. General feelings about moving on? Okay, cool. Working group reports. We've got working group reports.
I don't know, I guess I just need to kind of like reach out to Maureen, because you're on SRC and we wanted to continue. We were talking about in the working group, continuing the conversation we were having at the MRC training, and you weren't there, but it was about, they gave a scenario about like a student organization that was explicitly exclusive, or that's how it ended up. It was kind of like, not originally the scenario, but it was, we ended up talking about student groups that are explicitly exclusive for certain reasons, and talking, I don't know, just, we should talk about this sometime.
Yeah, we talked about this at SOC, Senate Working Group, on Saturday. And I'm trying to pull up the minutes right now to remember what we discussed, but, I don't know, you guys remember?
I can do that.
You?
I have the minutes. Saturday, so 19?
Yeah. Wait, so you were there?
Oh, was it?
No.
Oh, SFC Ace Logic now.
Yeah, well,
I mean, basically the way it works now is that like certain groups that exist as exclusive groups on campus sort of operate under like umbrella organizations, like Zombie sort of gets funding from Oberlin, I think. And so that's sort of like an unofficial way to keep it afloat. But we've been talking about like, you know, there are going to be scenarios that are probably going to arise where like groups don't have an umbrella organization to work through. So, I mean, it's definitely a conversation we need to have.
I think. Oh, sorry.
You got everything?
I mean, you can go. I'm still looking at the notes.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like, for instance, Zami is not chartered. I think, like, for instance, Soka operates under Abruzzo, but it's also, I think, chartered.
Yeah.
And so they can, I don't know if they can factor that into that, Abruzzo can factor that into their budget to say, like, these groups are under it, but I don't think Zami is pretty much invisible to the school more broadly because it's not chartered for that purpose.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know if they're, like, even if it is under an umbrella group, I mean, like, making sure it has a budget every year is close to impossible, and it's always also like requesting funds, so it doesn't have like a stable idea of what it can do each semester it operates. But yeah, we can talk about this.
Yeah, so a couple things. So it's right now like the issue is not necessarily with the SFC, although the SFC can change certain. Like there's a policy that you can only ad hoc for 2 years, and that could be like changed for this kind of a scenario. But like apart from that, it's more of a chartering question. So I'm gonna talk to Tina Zwegat on Monday, and see like I don't know, test those waters a little bit, and something else. Darn, what was it? Yeah, so I'm just gonna keep like following up with that, and let y'all know. If I remember what I was going to say, I'll throw that in there randomly.
Cool. Keaton? Alright. Go for it.
Oh, my roommate and Mia and I had a good conversation about what like potentially like having an application process for an exclusive organization would look like. So it's like, yeah, like we want to make sure that having an exclusive organization and that it's like intentional in the right ways, you know. So like, I don't know, like we were kind of thinking through some like, you know, there could be like, you know, an application that the organization fills out and it's like explaining their reasoning, and then like a panel of people who could like review it, you know, from different perspectives, and like we thought that might be a good solution.
So would it be sort of like a subcommittee of the chartering committee, you would imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess something to talk about too.
Kicking up to the fun stack?
Yeah, our group also talked about like how to vet that type of thing. We talked about applications. We were also like very like general because we didn't know all the technical ins and outs of chartering and SSC and how that operated, but we know those were the two main organizations that had to go through. And yeah, especially with like the you mentioned like the 2-year thing. If you're not like chartered, you can't ad hoc for like 2 years straight or something like that. So like Colors of Rhythm, for instance, has to like every other year like figure out funding or like, you know, for which is not an organization. It is an organization, but it's not chartered for obviously reasons for its mission statement and its purpose. But yeah, just like we talked about application processes. Right.
Yeah, one question that came up in a conversation I had about this was to make sure, like, some way to demonstrate that like groups do want this, that we're not just like going through the ropes and like affecting a change if it's not going to be like used afterwards. And I'm sure that groups do want this, but I don't know for a fact. So I don't know. I think it would be important to add to the conversation like some form of like outreach to groups that would fall under this category that like might want to be chartered in like an alternative way, and like and we can talk about this in South Campus Working Group or something. But I think that's also important to the whole process.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Any other working group reports? Awesome. General feelings and moving on to decisions. Awesome. That seems positive. Moving on to decisions. Does anyone have anything we need to decide? Wonderful. But we do have quorum, so if you want to come back to that, we are more than welcome to. General feelings on moving on to discussions. Good. All right, discussions. The first thing we got up here is the tobacco forum. What are y'all thoughts? What tobacco forum? Go for it.
I just brought up because there was a lot of difference of opinion. I guess Sienna should talk about Sienna stuff, considering that it's going to be 20%. And they have a lot, like a lot. So, yeah.
That's
not easy at all.
Some of us have had a lot.
No, we're checking out.
Well, it's 7:34 now. So we're really efficient. I'm going to go for it.
So yeah, I mean, I think you were all there, so we laid out the presentation of how things would potentially go in, adjustments we've made thus far. If there's still adjustments to be made, I think that would be a good time to voice them. I do plan on presenting a resolution either supporting or not supporting the potential policy next week. So since we do have a lot of time right now, we'll just save time to talk about it.
Okay.
Is there anything people think should be like changed?
I guess let's keep staff.
We're good to go.
Go for it.
Okay, a couple of things that I was a little troubled by after the forum. The first is that there are clearly there's a set of disciplinary policies, after X times this is going to happen before and so on and so forth, that's not reflected in the current writing of the policy. And I think that's something that's really important to be included because students don't know what's going to happen to them if they do continue to smoke, and that needs to happen. Also, the second thing is I was wondering about smoking zones on campus. I've heard directly contradictory responses or answers to that question from different people involved in this. And so a little bit of clarification on will there be smoking zones on campus other than Tappan Square? And if so, what will they be? Would be something good to know.
Yeah, so after the tobacco policy, I talked to a few friends and I talked to some people from Oberlin, Republicans in the campus. And pretty much the general thing that I got out of that was that if this does go through, there absolutely needs to be smoking zones and not just one and not extremely out of the way. People mentioned behind the or the Aston parking lot or somewhere around there or something of that sort. But also people did express a lot of understanding as to the necessity of there not being in high traffic areas smoking. So behind the thing is a really high traffic area. It's the one straight path from north to south campus. So that being a really high traffic area, right in front of the high traffic area, Ryan Wilder, high traffic area, so forth. And so those two things in conjunction with each other. So yeah, also potentially adding in some form of thinking about harm reduction as regards smoking rather than disciplinary action. So if you do have smoking zones, and it's everyone knows Oberlin's weather is shit most of the year. So having shelters and no seriously having not very together shelters, not whole buildings or anything, but whatever you call them, with heat lamps or something. Should be a reasonable request.
Yeah, so let's go those are kind of related. So we did think about the whole smoking zones thing because obviously realistically there are going to be people who first of all remain on campus. So for instance the current freshmen and double degree students who migrate. So there is going to be that transition period. So and there are going to be some people who come to campus and still choose to smoke. So you have to have a place to go and smoke. And so we looked at the campus map and basically identified a place with vulnerabilities. And one like Kiki said, you don't want high traffic areas just for health purposes. you want something that's centrally located so that it's like fairly accessible to all parts of campus. And so we thought about that. We looked in the map, and there just aren't a lot of spaces that are like that. I've heard like behind mud brought up, but the thing is that a lot of employees work right in that area in the auxiliary buildings, and so like do you really want to make the decision where you're forcing students to that area to smoke and possibly impeding upon like, the workers who are working there. And Tappan Square was thought of, and so it makes sense in my perspective. Number one, because it is kind of the central building area on campus. Number two, it's a community space. Like technically, it's owned by the college, but like everyone kind of understands it as like seamlessly part of the town. And so though we do have a jurisdiction over that, like do you really want to be policing that area? And so that's another like, argument for keeping that as a smoking zone. And then Kiki also made a good point about having like the covered areas, and in Tappan Square there's it called the gazebo? Or is that an instrument? Like,
It's the gazebo.
I'm sorry. Yeah, like the covered wood area. You can't have like a building, because in the state of Ohio you can't have like buildings where you smoke indoors. But this is like a covered place where people can go in the instance of like rain or snow or other Ohio shit. So, I forget, you had another question? The first one.
I got it, Aaron.
Wait, can I respond to that? That was a question to me.
Oh, yeah, sure, go for it.
The other comment was that I thought it would be important to have the disciplinary policy included in the actual ban, because students otherwise will not know how it affects them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the position that we articulated in the presentation is the one that we intend to advocate for to the judicial board, and that is like having a you don't want to take a punitive approach to the entire process. Like you want to take into account people's individual circumstances, and so how that language is ultimately crafted, like we're working with judicial board right now, is like take that, to like put that forward. We had something rudimentary written up. I guess it wasn't included in the online version, which is bad. We've been like updating it every day and like shooting versions back and forth. So if it's not up, just know that portion of it is being taken into account and it won't be.
Aaron.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about Tappan Square as being the location, and I understand the argument like that the college does own it, but it's like also seamlessly part of the community, and it's like kind of a gray area. So I understand that argument, but I question the logic of it in keeping with the idea of like reduced sort of traffic areas, because like Tappan is a pretty like people go through Tappan a lot, and I also so that's I don't know, that's a lot of the arguments with this like seem to contradict themselves like at some point in the process. So I've been thinking a lot about that. Emma and I took a walk through like central and bit of north campus to like look for possible zones, and like I also agree with what we were talking about earlier, which is that like there aren't a lot of zones. One question that we had was the 30 feet rule. That's an Ohio thing, right? Like that's an Ohio regulatory issue. Okay, so then that's like I said, what's the caveat on that? We did look at the that picnic bench by Dascom, behind Dascom, between like Mud and Dascom, because it's a little out of the way, and that seems like a reasonable smoking zone as well, because it's by Mud and it's by, I don't know, so that's something to think about there. Some like shelter of canopy could be put up like part of the picnic bench, like I've seen that before, so.
Okay, thank you. Next one's done. I think maybe I'm as bad at it like talking before, but I think my point was not that we should have like one smoking zone, but multiple smoking zones so that it's accessible and not out of the way. And I think one spot would be out of the way depending on where you're coming from. So like finding ones that can be placed south, north, central campus that are not high traffic zones. Obviously, there's going to be people who walk through these spaces. I know that's not something you can like. There's no space on campus I will not walk through or have like some level of like traffic. Thinking of like but also making it known that these are like smoking zones, so people like, in the other instance, can to avoid those zones, that obviously aren't like blocking, like they're not gonna be in the spaces that are blocking you to like a certain destination, but like are like not like, I don't know. So like they could be like signs like this is a smoking zone, so take note, like don't walk through here if you're like asthmatic or so forth and so on, people might be smoking. And yeah, so reiterating that there should be multiple smoking zones, and shelter doesn't mean like an enclosed building, but like, for instance, like bus stops, like not a bus stop, but like I can't put the name of something like that. But like, like there's benches, there's sometimes like they even have heating lights that come down, depending on where you are. Also, as regards like judiciary action, like, yeah, it wasn't very clear to me like what it actually was. It's like a tentative, like after like X amount of times, like you're gonna get a warning, and like probably similar to the policy around like smoking, like similar to the disciplinary action that happened when you like died your smoke detector. You have to like write a paper, watch a video, and so forth. To me, that's like still kind of punitive in a way, and I just want that to be clarified so that like that is that is like a punishment in the form because it requires a lot of time for full-time students, also students who have jobs, also students who have a lot of stress to deal with. Like that's like not like just an easy thing to do. Not like similar to like for people who have a lot of money, like paying the fine is not like a big thing. For people who don't have a lot of money, paying the fine is $20 is a big thing. So thinking about that as regards like every student on campus does not have the same time commitments nor the same like financial like status. So like thinking about when you like add these like punitive actions, whether it's like fines or like committing time to like certain education programs, like it's not going to be equally weighed in on each student the same and equally like punitive in the same ways.
Okay. I'll put this on stack and I'll come to show next. I was just going to say on your last idea in terms of levying fines against students for disciplinary action. Have we ever looked into if students could face reduced fines because they do occur as part of discipline action in proportion to the financial aid they receive from the school? Because that would, to at least some extent, rectify the fact that money could mean a lot more to different students based on their economic background. Yeah, Mark, maybe I got you up next.
Yeah, I think the point about having the zones be accessible is a very good point. If you guys have recommended, so correct me, Aaron, if I just want to make sure I understand. Do you mean like this, like I'm eating at Bascom, I leave, and there's like the benches right there?
No.
What do you mean?
I mean, and Jesse, if you can take some minutes because Miliaka's gone.
Oh, no, I'm taking notes.
Oh, Lauren's taking. I'm sorry, Jesse. No, I mean you walk out of the dining hall exit and you turn left, like so you're facing like Mud and Wilder, and you walk left and you take a left again on that sidewalk that immediately comes out there, and you follow that down along the fence, not fence, like the brown wooden fence thing, and then there's a picnic bench down there.
You're on stack.
You mean in between mud and dash?
Picture?
Oh, I have a picture of it.
I'll go look. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, there's a bench right there.
Okay. Also, Hope made a very good point to me the other day when we were talking about this. And the college is in the business of acquiring more land over time, maybe not now, but like 10, 20 years, right? And so one thing that we can't really predict is how that affects accessibility for people in terms of these smoking zones. So one thing that is going to be written in the resolution I bring forward is for the college to take into consideration the growth of the school and possibly establishing more smoking zones, because the problem right now is that the campus is too constrained in terms of availability of open spaces, like low traffic spaces. And if we acquire more land, then that it should be taken into account that was maybe like potential zones for people. I have no idea what this is.
Did it change?
I don't know where it is.
No, that's the same.
Oh, so okay.
It's the
So
trees
that's
around
right
the-
here.
That's King. You can see King right in front of that.
Okay, so this is King.
Yeah.
This
There's
is
Warner.
And then that's right to the right.
That's not
You don't- like people walking there.
No,
That's not high traffic area.
it's not at all.
We didn't see a single person walk by when we were there.
That's towards like Village Housing, it's towards that parking lot that's right there, like close to behind that.
Just like
Sarah on stack.
I was gonna say as regards like fine reduction, like I know that I'm like fully financed by the school. Yeah, when I have like a fine as regards like judiciary thing, like if that is a thing, they did bring it up, which is like kind of shady, but also like it's not, I don't think that it is because it hasn't like it wasn't addressed at all. Secondly, like as regards like I don't know, I'm just confused. This is probably directed to you more so. For the policy, why are you writing a resolution rather than like adopting it straight into directly into the policy? Because it still seems to be like there's still changes that are happening. So why not adopt experience directly into the policy? Because I believe that Senate resolution is hold weight only like not really like only like if you want it to hold weight or not. Sort of. It doesn't really have any like official say so. So why not adopt it directly into the policy?
Yeah, so that's good. Since the policy is still being written, the way the committee is looking at this resolution is informing them of student opinions, right? And so I think that's why it's important for us to like really take it seriously and like look at the language, because basically whatever we advocate for are going to be the priorities that the committee takes into account to establishing this policy. I mean, I can't say like it will be verbatim what happens. Like this is our opportunity to say like this is how we think things should be done, and that's why we're advocating for this specifically. There's also the point brought up earlier, or I don't know if I'm allowed to address another question.
Yeah, Sarah goes back. And, do you have a clarification?
So this, I mean, the resolution will be drafted before the policy is brought to Senate so that they can adopt it or try to adopt someone before.
So I've written a resolution actually already. It's basically saying like this is what we support, right? It's like a resolution. And so the policy is like in a flux and it's changing. And so whatever we articulate in the policy are going to be the values that everybody's taking into account when recommending about the policy.
We got Sarah on stack.
And I don't know how Ohio law works or when this will be there, but I'm pretty sure the area that you found was the one that Paul said that they were putting a greenhouse in.
Are they?
That's, if I recall correctly, he's obviously not here, but I'm like 90% sure that's where he said the greenhouse was going to be, and I don't know if that counts as a building, but I don't know if we want to look into that at all. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Stack is empty. Woo! All right. Ahmed.
Yeah, there's the earlier point I wanted to clarify about like punitive versus educational. And like the way that I was advocating for these things within the meetings was that like I don't think that people should be punished for this, right? I think it should be like an educational opportunity. And so that's why like I came up with the ideas of like you meet with like the deans and like student health people and you become aware of resources. Perhaps do things that I perceive as like educational activities, but if other people perceive them to be punitive, then I mean I think that's bad. We should like focus it back towards the educational approach. And so if there are alternative activities that we could use to substitute that, then I'd love to see what those might be look like.
Okay. Yeah, start on stack.
I think the idea is that like consequences are consequences, so like regardless of like what the labels of what that consequence is, whether that's like educational or like you have to pay a fine or something like that, there are consequences and like take into account like that they will affect students differently is my point. And so like obviously I mean I don't know. Yeah. And I think if like you're aiming to not police bodies, like having consequences for having consequences for like being caught smoking is still like a form of policing. Just like not really much way around that other than saying like, oh, you have a warning, don't smoke here. Or you have people saying like, oh, don't smoke here. And I mean, you said like after like X amount of times like that will be like there will be consequences, but even still like would there be an option to say that there are no consequences? I mean, there are no consequences, but it will be enforced. As in like there are obviously safety and security officers at most spots and like saying like safety and security officers saying like you need to like move to this space and blah blah blah. Like it's also not consequences, but that's also still enforcing the policy.
Okay, Rachel, next up on stack, and then Mahmoud.
Yeah, like thinking about the way a lot of school policies have like punitive consequences. I think like our goal in like drafting, I mean, I haven't seen the current resolution, but like my goal at least is to like make it more like less punitive and more lenient than like how you would be punished if you were violating another school policy. I mean, there's like certainly like consequences for like violating policies now that I think would be too harsh for this kind of situation. So I think like we could certainly make amends to like whatever consequence. I mean, like if it's a policy, there will be some enforcement, I guess. So like another means of enforcement that don't like unfairly punish people, and certainly not too soon. But I think like our goal should be to like think of ways that we can make this enforced without like taking too much of a toll on people, and like in a better way than other policies currently do.
I got options in here.
Yeah, I really agree with Richard's last point, and I think that one of the cool things about the judicial board and the way that we're going to be working with them on this specifically is that if we keep things not vague enough, but leave enough power to the judicial board to really like take into account people's circumstances, like in that instance, they can understand whether or not a person is being like repeatedly caught for this because they're just like not like adhering, they're just like ignoring it, or if there are like broader forces at play which are preventing like any kind of serious effort to stop like smoking, right? And so that's why I wanted to keep within the resolution at least the language kind of general. And I think that's what I'm really talking about earlier. And just saying like the primary emphasis is on taking into account like every person's like specific situation, and in that process making sure that it's like a focus on educational approaches and not punitive aspects. What that means, we may have to have a discussion with the district boards, like talk about, well, okay, what is educational versus punitive, and like how do like different actions affect different groups of people. But that's kind of a longer conversation that I think we may sit down and talk to them with, especially like thinking about what kind of precedent they have in terms of use of like different actions. Because I know like there's like a video thing, there's like writing a paper, there's the fines obviously, but I don't really know like how appropriate are all these actions for this specific policy. And you know, that's a discussion that we still need to have. But in terms of what happens next week and like what we write into the resolution, I think the most important thing is to clearly articulate that the two values informing this are the individual nature of every case and the education-based approach, which the meaning of which is obviously up to interpretation.
Okay, there you go.
I really agree with what's been said. Thank you. So I have a question, and I apologize if I'm missing information because I wasn't able to make the tobacco forum. But my biggest concern as a random student with this policy is that we talk a lot about accessibility to all students, which is obviously vitally important. But this policy is going to have an enormous effect on the Oberlin community as a whole. And you know, we go to a school that is creating a ridiculous amount of tension with the town that it's financially supporting. And so my understanding of why Captain Square was going to be designated as a smoking space, which you kind of touched on, Mahmoud, was that so like increasing police presence and focusing monitoring mechanisms on like a space that is such mixed ownership is like super problematic. So regardless of whether that's like a highly frequented space, like screw it, we cannot increase police presence in Tappan Square. It's insane. So I'm just wondering what else you guys have been talking about in terms of easing tensions between college and town with this policy.
Yeah, so definitely no like police presence. The expectation is that we're going to be kind of versing the campus over the next few years about how to approach people and like remind them of the tobacco-free policy and like point them towards resources. I don't know if you know about this, but like in terms of like punitive aspects, if a student is caught, like we go through the entire process that we just talked about, but if it's a non-student, then there are no ramifications, like simply has to stop smoking. And so that's something that's like not very confrontational. There are going to be signs up that say like this is tobacco free campus, so there are like visual reminders of that. What else? And yeah, like you mentioned, you can't really do anything with Tappan because like it's kind of lose-lose situation. You can say, okay, we're going to keep it as a smoking area. Naturally, there are going to be more people there, but the alternative is like policing the space, which technically legally you could do, but it's just a choice, you know. So it's kind of controversial, I guess.
I got Kiki and Rachel.
regards like, also like when we were talking about education, like talk about like movements, like sensation projects to help them like quit. That's like under the assumption that everybody wants to quit smoking, and I think that's like that goes against the idea of like harm reduction. It's the assumption that like people can do with their bodies what they want, and the point of like, I guess like the government overseer, like the outside sources, like trying to get that person to say, hey, you're doing it in the safest ways. And like, I don't know, I think that should keep in mind when creating a tobacco policy is like harm reduction on like both sides, people who like are like negatively affected by like secondhand smoke and people who choose to smoke for reasons that like for their own purposes, like keeping that in mind, like not trying to like police people's bodies and what they do with their bodies, but helping them to do it in ways that are safest for like themselves and other people. Also like as regards like Times Square, like I absolutely agree with what you were saying, Hannah. Like I don't think that is reasonable or like to have like Times Square be like a non-smoking area. As regards like, they're also like thinking about like how many people are like, how many like, for instance like families who walk through there and so forth and so on who live in the town and having like just one spot, like a flow of college students just smoking there would also create a really high like smoking area in one of the like very like public like park spaces, like one of few public park spaces in Oberlin. So that's why like I emphasize on like having multiple spaces on campus that are not like, taking up more space from town college spaces or like, town spaces. So like even if we didn't have, even if like the entire campus was like smoke free, like college students would flood to the town to smoke, and then that would be like helping the students on campus, but like very much like harming like other bodies. So like again, not just having one spot so there isn't like a smoke cloud that people have to walk through, especially in such like a public space, but also not policing that space in a way that's like harmful to like people who live in the community. Both sides of that.
I had another point to Hannah's question. The committee has also been involved with like asking local businesses and like people who are our neighbors, like how this policy would affect them. So there has been some outreach done about that. So far, there hasn't been any like real negative feedback about that. And then yeah, I also wanted to speak to the harm reduction point. I'm in the student health working group, and we're working on compiling like a list of mental health resources and like other health resources, and those I believe would be also linked to the Oberlin wellness page, where you like so that you see like the tobacco policy there, but then you would also be directed to like a list of other resources on campus to help with like the issues that probably prompt people to start smoking in the first place. And like the way that I've understood the policy is that it's not necessarily trying to make everyone stop smoking or like police their personal decisions, just like reduce the harm done from secondhand smoking on our campus where there's like a lot of traffic. So like that's why we're like working together to try to find like places, like a place so far, one place at least where people can smoke, and like also provide them with like other resources if they choose to stop.
Okay, we got Sarah next.
Just to speak to like the consequences thing, I understand where Mark was coming from with like the educational thing, because this is the college on some level recognizing that tobacco is bad for you, and it's the same way that they recognize that alcohol is bad for you. The college will talk to you about safe ways to drink, and like when we get down to it, there's no safe way to put alcohol, which is ultimately a toxin, into your body. But they came up with policies and programs which describe safe ways to drink. And so this educational thing from what I'm getting will be about safe ways to smoke and like safe ways to reduce stress, such as alternatives. And I think that Kiki raises a good point with how anything educational is going to take time, and we set up systems to make sure that you do the educational training with alcohol, so there's probably going to be a system to make sure you do the educational training with smoking. And something that you guys might consider would be like how much time you get to fulfill that educational requirement, because if it takes an hour and you have 2 weeks, that's significantly more doable than an hour in 1 week or something like that. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Yeah, I do think that. I mean, if we can find multiple zones, like that would be an ideal situation. So if there are other places that people suggest, it would be great to hear this. We'll look into this greenhouse thing. I've heard about that as well. So if it is the same spot, obviously you can't do that. There are maps online you can all look at to check out like potential areas. So basically, like what we're looking at is not a high traffic area and something that's like accessible to people. Those are the two. I also want to be a little wary of the comparison to alcohol because I do think that like there are a lot of things that are bad for you. You know, like alcohol is bad for you, tobacco is bad for you, but like what's informing this specific move is the fact that the use of tobacco is not only having negative effects on oneself but also others. And so if it was just like going after people for doing bad things to themselves, then we would get rid of like the french fries and stevie and like drinking on campus. But like we're not going to do that because people are adults and make their own decisions. But we do want to be aware that there are some decisions that individuals make which do adversely affect others. And so that's like where institutions sometimes have a role in intervening. So I just wanted to make that decision.
Your next one, yeah, again, to Sarah's point about alcohol and like toxins into the body, I think we also like what Malcolm said, like it's very different in tobacco and alcohol. Also, like typically when you have to go through like educational process with alcohol is because you probably drink too much and like passed out or had to go through some type of medical like see some sort of thing, which is actually when you're like immediately in danger. Whereas like smoking is like even if I smoke a pack a day, I'm not gonna like just die. Like it's not gonna put my life in immediate danger, which is not like like risk to the college or like any type of like like they don't have like I don't know. So like that's very different. And again, that's like under the assumption that like other things aren't toxins. Like again, like food that has probably like X amount of hormones in it, or X, Y, and Z. So like again, like thinking about like it is very different to like compare like the alcohol policy to the tobacco policy, because if you do like you can like overdose on alcohol like immediately, like, especially if you take it with other things. Cigarettes, it's very unlikely, very hard to overdose unless you're like doing a lot of them. But anyways, yeah. So as regards like education, I'm also like I feel like people are doing like not like any type of consequences for like people in the town, but like being kind of like not okay with that same thing for like people who go to the college, and like to me that's confusing. Like absolutely, like that doesn't mean like I think there should be punishment for people in the town. That's the thought is like why not have like similar policy around people who go to the college who will probably be in the college campus more often than people who live in the town. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. And let me just kind of talk through my thinking about that. I think that the only way that we could have something that people regularly follow, at least students, since they are the ones that are primarily on campus all the time, is if we had like a very like securitized campus and like there's a much higher SMS presence and like people just like on the patrol all the time and like being on that. And that's not something that anyone wants. I don't think that's good. We don't want that. Basically, you want to have a situation where community members, and by that I mean like students, faculty, staff, and when it's going through campus, because where the policy can remind other people of it, and so that's like the primary method of enforcement. Of course, like if SNS catches a student, like that's another way, but it's not. The focus is not to increase SNS presence everywhere. Right? And so you think about how do you keep students accountable to the policy? Because presumably, if you have no ramifications and you don't have this increased police presence, which no one wants, it's kind of like it's a rule, but it's not really a rule. Kind of a like de facto norm in the way that marijuana is treated right now. And so obviously you want policy to be effective, and so you need to have some kind of structure in place that's going to keep people accountable to that. Obviously, you don't want it to be like malicious in intention, like an extremely punitive measure, and so that's why you have kind of a 5-time buffer, and then after that point, it is an educational approach.
Sorry, I know you guys are going. But like just thinking about like food for thought, like as regards like what we enforce on this campus as regards like, the safety of students on this campus. You're saying like there should like be that type of like possible consequence so that it's more like taken seriously. But as regards like, I don't know, I feel like it is like up to the college to build a community that does like kind of keep each other in check. Like, hey, yo, you're a friend of mine, you're not supposed to smoke here, or like you're not 30 feet away, you're not smoking something. And that can be developed. And I think that a similar like comparison and analogy, but not the same thing, but very similar, is like the fact that a lot of like students of color have to constantly educate like white people on like being mad racist to like them, or saying like or microaggressions, whereas like that should not be the job of students of color, that should not be the job of like allies to do that. However, it is by default, by de facto, and like there's no like, but that does like physical harm to students of color on campus when these things happen, like actually physical harm to these students, and it is like written like Oberlin's mission and blah 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 to like combat these things a certain way, but yet it's not enforced like with consequences. Like if somebody says something like really like fucked up shit to somebody, like oh it's like oh you shouldn't do that. There's no educational necessity, which is something that's been we've been trying to implement for a very long time, yet it's not like, I don't know, I just thinking about the ways we value certain bodies and certain like physical safety on this campus and what we think of as physical safety. And when you're talking about this tobacco policy, yes, it's like very dangerous for students who are athletic or like who have like breathing like complications to walk through like a cloud of smoke, and that should be up to the campus to like respect the bodies of students on campus, other students on campus. But to enforce that in ways and to value that over like other forms of like physical, I don't know, disregard from other students, like blatant disregard for other students' bodies on this campus, like it kind of like shows like whose bodies are like valued in certain ways, whose bodies are not, if that makes sense. Just like a little food for thought as regards like you and like as regards like insisting on like some form of consequence for like these actions because of like possible like physical ramifications for people who are like asthmatic, for instance. You know, just think.
So I just want to make sure I understand that. So it's like there are some forms of harm that affect students which are not enforced by a mechanism which involves punitive action. And so by means of that, we're implicitly saying that we are valuing the harm caused by some action over others.
I'm saying that there should be more emphasis built upon community like self-governance rather than like oversee, whereas like consequences, because that is like what a lot of marginalized communities have to default to, and it's the reality of a lot of students who live on this campus is they have to default to like defending themselves and their bodies like on a daily basis, and to like have this policy which may or may not like disproportionately affect certain students more, kind of devalues those bodies at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining this. I don't know if anybody else is understanding or wants to like.
Well, I think it's a good point to say like these things are not equal.
Absolutely.
But I also think that like we can do like let's say we keep what it is, what I've been proposing, and then also have like also address the other things. Like what I'm hearing is that like it's currently unequal, and so we shouldn't do it. But I think that we can like fix both. Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't know if you know it, there's like, out of like March 4th events, there was a group created to implement mandatory workshops, and like, the Senate didn't just get mandatory workshops until like a few years back, if that. So like, it's not like as easy as saying, well, let's just do it, because it's been very hard, because one faculty, like professors, it's very hard to get tenured professors to agree to have them do workshops. It's very hard to get students, every student here to get trained on certain things and to actually take in what that means. So if somebody gets trained, somebody can get trained a million times and still say the stupid shit. But they like, you know, and it doesn't, that's like, you know, it's still like a day-to-day like educational thing. And that needs to be the emphasis of the school if you're trying to change the culture of like how bodies are divided, whether that's like people smoking blatantly in front of King with disregard to people who are entering and exiting the building. Like that is a disregard to bodies who are like harmed by that, right? So like thinking about that, changing the culture of that by like having like people, like if that means like having like during orientation, like this is what the policy is, like students need to enforce this, SNS will enforce this, professors should enforce this, like encouraging that rather than like enforcing that under like punitive action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
So in ideal in my head, I am so behind what you're saying. In practice, it's, I mean, we go to an institution and it's difficult to get people to do things on enforcement mechanisms. People are busy, people care about things differently and have different priorities. And I just think that if, in practice, the only things I can think of to do that create sort of more, that create systems of community accountability as opposed to like punitive enforcement are forums, are getting people together and talking. And I don't think workshops, I think workshops are vitally important, but in this respect, workshops don't do jack shit. You're right, like they don't. And it's important to talk about those things, but when it's delivered in that fashion, it's hard for it to be as effective. But when people hold each other accountable, when somebody says, look, I'm asthmatic, and when you smoke next to me, I have a coughing fit for 20 minutes, that's gonna touch me way more personally and humanely than a regulation ever would. And so creating those spaces where people can talk to one another, I don't know, maybe somebody who has a certain number of violations would have to like, I don't know, that's still punitive, I don't know, but whatever. But creating some kind of like regular forum. I don't know if you could ever make that mandatory, but regular forum where people who were affected by secondhand smoke and people who smoked could talk to one another. Similarly, I think this issue should be put in front of the Oberlin Town Council. And I think that we should talk with the community about it. And I think there should be student representatives and administrative representatives, and I think we should be like, we're going to do this. What do you think about it? Is this going to affect you? Instead of, I mean, you want to get rid of the regulation, get rid of the regulation, have a conversation. And I think that's possible. Yeah.
Yes, we've spoken to, you were referring to the city council?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they've endorsed this. And they're also considering going tobacco-free as a city.
Really?
So
I'm sorry, finish. Did you, who presented it in front of the city council?
it was Lori Flood,
Okay.
the dean. There were no students in that conversation.
Okay.
Because we felt like it wasn't appropriate for like students to really be interjecting where that's like a more permanent body, like faculty, staff, and the community. Like those are people who have been here beyond 4 years. Yeah. So there's that, and then in regards to what Kiki was talking about, I think that the workshops, as far as I understand it, have been failed to be implemented like on a regular, like a mandatory basis for everyone prior to any kind of like negative action. Is that correct? Like the attempt was to have incoming students like be involved in these workshops, like all students be involved in these workshops at the beginning of the year. If I'm correct. So what I'm imagining more so is not doing something that precedes negative action, but it's more so like a response to it to help like educate people. And so, like maybe like a better comparison would be if a person committed an offensive act, and then as a result of that, they had to like conduct a like be in a workshop. Like, I think that's a closer comparison.
All right, stack is empty. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts, questions, concerns, or any jokes?
Okay. Other decisions?
Okay. General feelings on moving on to finding a facilitator for next week. Awesome. Who wants to do it?
Wasn't done.
Jesse, Rachel, Lydia. Who wants to do it?
Rachel's got it.
Okay, Rachel, you are officially facilitator next week. Congratulations. It's gonna be awesome. Checkouts. Say something you're gonna do or send it this week so that it can be written down by our taker, and then you can get into it. Is a thing. Oh no, just what we say we're gonna do for next week. Maybe it's the operations manager. I don't remember. Somebody writes it down.
I checked it. Somebody. You can go in the notes. It's probably better if it's in the notes. So it's on like.
Okay.
I'm sorry if you don't want to hear that. You probably don't.
I am going to
Challenge. 2 words or less.
All right, I'm good. I'm going to send a proposal for an EMT course. How am I doing?
Was that effective?
No.
Yes.
To the athletics and bio department.
American sucks.
Any other time?
Sure, I'm gonna have office hours.
Office hours.
Yes.
Office hours and looking for associate applicants.
For SFC applicants, I think you said we're looking for.
Committee interviews.
Am I repeating?
Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Rachel. I have it. Okay. Committee meetings, you said?
Committee interviews.
Yeah.
Do you understand how physical reactions?
Office hours and interviews.
Social regression.
Stage coup.
Office hour interviews and work public transport.
Right, where it's like when you have like triggers or something. Because
I am going to work with Paul on the sustainability working group to finish our resolution on sustainability on campus.
and it's very different to stay.
A couple of other things. I want to be brief with you, and I'm going to go to the forum that we're all required to go to on Wednesday.
Wednesday?
I meant to say that as well.
Oh, I have one.
Thing, like, you should just suck it up, like, you just wear it.
But I was gonna say, I know what you're doing all week.
Sticking stones in the great mountain one column.
I can't make Wednesday.
So can you email us?
Wednesday, I only say an hour though.
Hey guys, this doesn't need to be on the minutes because we're done, but I have a couple of friendly announcements for you guys as the operations manager. The first, if you have not yet been to 2 committee interviews this semester, you need to get on that because I have to give you points if you don't go to. Also, you should go to them anyways because they're not high turnout. And these are important. Don't make Aaron do it by himself again. It's sad. The second is minutes are completely updated. If you have any questions, email me. I'm sending out a couple of emails tonight to get people like caught up on where they stand, so look out for that. And there's a couple people I need to talk to go over specific issues. So where they are right now is not 100% final. There's a few things that are in contest. So like, please don't ask questions about other people's points because they may not be solid, but yours I'd be happy to talk to you about. The third is we do have a forum, 7:30 to 8:30 on Wednesday. If you can't come by the email 24 hours in advance, that would be super.
Wait, when is it?
This Wednesday?
7:30 to 8:30.
Yeah.
I would.
Okay, that would be super. And have a great week.
What do you do?
8:20.
What?
Is that good though that you're done?
It is good.
Good is subjective.
No, it is. It's a holiday.
No, I know that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's my
The number of things you have to deal with.
It's a national holiday.
Yeah.
It is?
I'm saying that, you know, when we
Is it
get
national
shit done, we
holiday?
just end
No.
early.
Okay,
420.
I'm just saying that when we get shit done, we just end early.
I don't want Easter to be a national
Yeah.
holiday. That's exploitative of my religion. It's also Easter cosmos.
Are you
It's the rising of Jesus.
Yeah, but